Let's make sure that we can go from slide to slide. We can. Okay. So priority 2, dealing with data. And what I did, much like with priority 1, was I created some, kind of some milestones, if you will, for the inclusion and the use of data. So milestone 1 was the examination of the current state of each department in correlation to the curriculum review cycle. And then what I said was that, we started out by reviewing the status and meeting with heads of department, which included our curriculum coordinator, to kind of gain and understand the pathway that we were going to follow. And then the heads of departments gave feedback, questions concerning the curriculum plan. And then we had a secondary meeting with our curriculum coordinator, which had to do with the trainings of the heads of the departments and the expectation, not only for the action items, but understanding, clear understanding of the prioritization of standards and how we are going to move forward in that regard. So let's see if we can get. So then in the third milestone was the training passing the training, or the training that moved from the heads of departments to the members of each department. And that was very beneficial, not only for the members of each department, but for me as a head of department. When you have to teach it, you suddenly pay attention much more closely. And in the teaching process, I was hit with all the questions from my members of my department. So my understanding grew exponentially, and it also allowed me to understand kind of the leadership role behind that, where, anytime you ask people to do things, you're going to have some people that just immediately want to know why and how and what if, and what if the power goes out, what if the ceiling falls down, all of these kinds of crazy things. And I actually really enjoyed that session. I got some good stuff out of it, and it really again helped me to understand at a deeper level how change can be challenging, and how having buy-in for these types of things can be quite the process. The next milestone was the feedback entered into Atlas by teaching staff for the first unit. Some of us have completed all of that, and some of us are still working towards that. But the expectation was communicated very clearly by our curriculum coordinator, and I feel like our department, my department especially, we have a pretty good understanding of what we need to do. I don't think we're done with everything yet, but we're definitely moving in a positive direction. And then moving on further, further units are to be examined. Directives have been assigned, many different directives in different areas on how we are supposed to move forward through Atlas Rubicon. Teachers are working on these assignments when possible. I have a very strong feeling that once we get done with AP testing, many of these action items will get cleared up very quickly. But right now, I can speak for myself as an AP teacher. I'm really starting to get into that zone where everything else kind of moves away, and I really need to get focused on my guys being ready for their AP test. And we're also moving. The last milestone was to better explore and understand the concepts and the process of vertical and horizontal alignment. I think that is an education process that many of the teachers, myself included, could use a better understanding, not only of what we do, but what are the benefits of it, like what, the why, really understanding the why. And that is something that I'm very much interested in, and I want to be a part of, if there's a way of, growing my depth of understanding. Do you have any comments or observations about goal 2?
No, we certainly are doing a good job of looking at teacher data,
Mm-hmm.
getting people engaged with External data as well continues to be an area for growth,
Mm,
um, because the thing about teacher assessments is they're neither valid or reliable. Without moderation, without calibration, if we're making our decisions solely off of what teachers are seeing in the classroom or what we're seeing in power school, we may be making some bad decisions. And so building in teacher capacity to also be able to look at testing data and be able to disaggregate it
hmm
is an area that we need to continue to work on, um, whether it's by department so that it's not a single thing that people feel like they have to tackle on their own,
mm,
but certainly disaggregating that data and um, not just focusing on just what we are doing in the classroom and what we understand as a school is prioritized, but why are we making those decisions? Why is that prioritized?
mm.
You know, where is that information coming from? So it all needs to be data driven. It can't just be, this is my anecdotal observation.
hmm
So that's an area where we still need to continue to improve. So I mean, obviously, teacher feedback and observations is very important data. Um, it just can't be the only data.
And what happens? One of the things that I'm curious of is as we move forward through this, um, what do we then do when we deem that standards are prioritized, and how do we teach them differently? And I think that that's all part of the process that we need to go
Right.
through in our growth, correct?
Right. So part of the horizontal articulation is if someone else is doing this, why are you doing it alone? Right? Or why do you need to spend this much time on it
hmm
if someone else is also
hmm
teaching the same concept? So it then allows you to increase your pacing, because that's something that everyone is struggling with,
True.
right? And so if you're finding out that other people are doing the same thing, why are you spending a month when you may only need to spend 2 weeks? Or why are you not working with that other teacher
hmm
in a different department to go, you know what? If kids can see the connections across multiple disciplines, they're much more likely to understand
hmm
and make connections, and then you're able to move quicker.
That makes sense.
So that's obviously part of that whole horizontal um, piece. Where are the opportunities where you can either collaborate
hmm
or decide I don't need to spend as much time on this because I know they're getting it. So that's part of the piece for the horizontal. Um, the EAL piece is another component of that,
hmm
um, because scaffolding implies that everything is still the same.
hmm
You're never teaching to the middle or to the group you have. You're always teaching to the standard. The scaffold is what changes, and you remove more of the scaffold. But if you never ever are teaching at the standard, then how do you ever expect them to get there? Right? If you're starting at a lower level because they're at a lower level, then that's where they're going to be. You teach to the standard, and then you provide the scaffolds so that on day one they're still producing the standard. They just have a lot more support,
hmm
but they know exactly what they're supposed to be producing. Then when you remove the scaffolds, they're able to do it more on their own. And so, to think that, oh, I'm going to teach down here and somehow they're going to eventually get here, that there's a disconnect.
Yeah, one of the questions I always have, uh, you know, as these new students continue to arrive is, our cohort continues to change, and we're a very different school than we were last year.
Mhm.
So that plays into what you're talking about, not only with us better understanding what it is that we're teaching, but how do we support and engage the
Right.
amount of support that we need.
And obviously, the model um, has not changed. And so, how can we make sure that we are addressing the newcomers, should they even be coming into the program,
Hmm.
without some kind of prep program, some kind of orientation that gets them ready to roll.
Hmm.
So, because if they don't have the language proficiency, um, no matter what you're doing, no matter how effectively you're teaching, um, they don't know what's going on,
Yeah.
right? So, so there are other factors, um, but what we have to be clear on is what is the end goal, where should we be? So, you should know from day one where you want your kids to be on day 90,
Right.
on day 180, right? Um, and so you build your scaffolds accordingly. And of course, there should, by day 180, no scaffolds are needed, hopefully.
Yeah.
Um, but just looking at that, and so they're just having to go back and go, all right, guys, let's refocus.
Hmm.
Um, let's step back and kind of take a view of what's going on. And now that we have done that, and we go, no, what we have prioritized is what we want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Um,
it is interesting to say that you stand in front of your class and you think about where you want them to be. One of the challenges for I think a lot of us is we're not really sure where all of our students are in what their needs are when we start the class. We're kind of sometimes playing a bit of a catch up. So maybe, that's obviously part of the challenge when
yeah,
you are when you're a school that kind of welcomes people at various different times of the year, and yeah, really
so
changes the flow.
it does. But that's why formative, knowing that their score at the end is the only thing that matters, formative assessment practices
Hmm.
are key.
Yep, they are.
And you should have a minimum of two prompts each day that these are two things that I need to be making sure students can demonstrate by the end of this class. And whether they are producing something, whether we're having a discussion, it doesn't matter. 2 to 3 prompts should always be a part of every lesson to say, I know that they've learned this, this, and this when they left the class. And then that starts giving you more data about what I need to do next.
Hmm.
If people are waiting until summatives or to a more official formative, it's too late.
Hmm.
There should be a minimum of 2 formative assessments every class. It can be excessive. It can be so small, and not thinking of, oh, this is something I'm putting in power school.
Hmm.
But you have to have assessment prompts that go, how do I know after 30 minutes if they got it? If I go a whole 40 minutes, an hour, and I've not done some checks, I have no idea if anybody knows what I talked about,
Yeah.
right? And so one of the things we're looking at is, you know, getting people a better understanding of what are the best assessment practices, right? Um, because assessment should be tied to instruction. If you're not doing good formative assessment practices, then you don't know if what you have imparted has been received. So you don't know if you've covered the content or taught it without formative assessment. You could have covered it. That doesn't mean anybody learned anything.
Right.
So how does formative assessment tie into it going from being covered to it being taught? And just revisiting that and providing more PDs on that is a key thing that needs to happen.
I wonder how we would be,